3 years of marriage, 108 brutal beatings, and now it was finally time for payback. The same 6-inch stiletto heels her husband once used to terrorize her had now become the weapon of his downfall. This wasn't a fashion show, it was the explosive end of 3 years of abuse. Desperate to survive, the husband came up with a new plan. He deliberately knocked over a glass of water and pretended he was ready to sign the divorce papers. But his real target was a sharp piece of broken glass on the floor. Using his foot, he carefully grabbed it and secretly hid it in his hand. The moment his wife walked into the kitchen, he used the glass shard to slowly cut through the ropes binding him. Finally free, he silently crept up behind her. Just one more step, and he was ready to strike. But before he could attack, his mother-in-law burst into the room. Without hesitation, she tackled him, tied him up again, and crushed his escape plan. By now, both women knew the truth. If this man was left alive and conscious, he would never stop hurting people. Determined to keep him under control, the mother-in-law somehow got her hands on a powerful sedative from a psychiatric hospital. The husband, however, wasn't done fighting. First, he tried flattering his wife's cooking, hoping she'd let her guard down. When that failed, he slowly dragged himself toward a nearby support pillar. His new plan? Threatened to kill himself and force the women to let him go. But the mother-in-law saw right through him. His bluff failed. Then, the doorbell rang. Standing outside was his boss. If he walked inside, everything would be over. Panicking, the women immediately turned on the blender to drown out any noise. They stuffed a rag into the husband's mouth and injected him with a sedative. The first shot barely worked, so they gave him a second one. He writhed in pain for a few moments. Then, his body went completely limp. The women carried him into the bedroom and laid him on the bed before finally answering the door. When the boss stepped inside, he saw the husband barely conscious on the mattress. Assuming he had simply passed out drunk, he didn't suspect a thing. As he turned to leave, he picked up his car keys. But at that exact moment, the husband grabbed the keys with every ounce of strength he had left. He desperately wanted to beg for help. His lips moved, but no words came out. Somehow, the wife managed to talk her husband's boss into leaving without getting suspicious. This time, they got lucky. But what if someone showed up again? That single thought made her realize she couldn't keep living like this. She had to get rid of him, once and for all. Her mind raced through several options. First, she considered suffocating him with a plastic bag. Then she thought about drowning him, but both methods would raise too many questions with the police, so she came up with a third plan. She got her husband drunk, led him out onto the balcony, and prepared to push him over the edge, making it look like a tragic accident caused by alcohol. But the moment he realized he was about to die, his confidence disappeared. He broke down in tears, begging for forgiveness. He swore he'd never hit her again. Then he made one final offer. He promised to confess everything on camera, to admit every time he had abused her and turn the recording into proof of his crimes. Once again, she wanted to believe him. Thinking he had finally changed, she turned on the camera and made him confess everything. He admitted to beating his wife repeatedly, abusing her for years, and turning her life into a living nightmare. But she wasn't done yet. She decided to keep the recording safe and release it publicly if she ever needed to, so the world would know exactly who he really was. The husband thought the nightmare was over. Surely she'd untie him now. He waited, but he had no idea she had no intention of letting him go. Now she had the evidence she needed. If anything happened to him after this, most people would believe it was nothing more than a tragic accident. But what kind of pain does a woman have to endure? How many times does she have to be broken before she reaches a point where revenge feels like the only way out? To understand that, we have to go back 3 years. Badru was a sweet, innocent young woman who believed completely in love. Her future husband won her heart with nothing more than a simple teddy bear, and before long, the two were married. She believed she had found her happily ever after. Instead, she walked straight into a nightmare. Her husband was a violent alcoholic. One evening, while eating dinner, he bit down on a tiny grain of sand in his food. That was all it took. His temper exploded. Terrified, Badru quickly held out her hand so he could spit the food into it instead, but that wasn't enough to calm him down. His rage only got worse. The screams, the arguments, and the beatings became so common that even the neighbors downstairs stopped reacting. They had heard it all before. The most heartbreaking part? The very next morning. Badru was back in the kitchen, lovingly preparing breakfast for the same man who had abused her the night before, and the moment he woke up, he did the one thing she had sadly become used to. Even after everything she had been through, Badru was still hopelessly in love with her husband. It didn't take much. A few sweet words, a fake apology, and she forgave him once again. When he noticed the bruises around her neck, he pretended to feel guilty. But instead of blaming him, Badru comforted him, convincing herself that alcohol, not her husband, husband, was the real problem. Her mother, however, knew better. Every bruise on her daughter's body broke her heart. To the outside world, her son-in-law looked like an ordinary, respectable man. Behind closed doors, he was a violent alcoholic who couldn't control his anger. Desperate to save her marriage, Badru secretly bought medication designed to help people quit drinking. She crushed the pills and mixed them into his favorite mutton curry. But once again, nothing went according to plan. Somehow, her husband found out. The moment he got home, he grabbed her by the throat and nearly choked her while threatening her. Shaken and in tears, Badru ran to her mother. As she looked out the window, she noticed children playing outside. That's when an idea crossed her mind. Maybe, if they had a baby, her husband would finally change. Holding on to that hope, she bought beautiful clothes, slipped into high heels, put on ruby earrings, sprayed on perfume, and did everything she could to make him happy. But that hope was crushed the very same night. The drunken husband walked in, saw the high heels, and immediately accused her of cheating. Then he forced her into a terrifying game. He spread his fingers across the floor and ordered Badru to strike between them with the pointed heel of her stiletto. "If you miss my fingers," he said, "I'll believe you're innocent." Terrified, she did exactly as he demanded. When it was over, he simply walked away without saying a word. The next morning, after sobering up, he acted as if nothing had happened. Just like always, he tried to charm her with fake affection. But this time, Badru refused to open the bedroom door. The moment he left for work, years of bottled-up pain finally exploded. She smashed dishes, furniture, and everything she could get her hands on. Unfortunately for her, a bearded neighbor witnessed the entire breakdown. He had seen enough. Unable to stay silent any longer, he secretly called the police. At the station, the officer made it clear, if Badru filed a formal complaint, her husband could spend years behind bars. For a brief moment, it seemed like she was finally going to escape, but then the cycle repeated itself. Her husband cried, he apologized, he promised he would change, and once again, Badru believed him. She withdrew the complaint and walked out of the police station with him. Just as they stepped outside, a bird dropped its mess right on her. Badru laughed, thinking it was a sign of good luck. She had no idea. It was the beginning of the biggest turning point of her life. About a month later, she discovered she was pregnant. For the first time, her husband actually tried to quit drinking. It looked like everything was finally getting better, but then he learned who had reported him to the police, the bearded neighbor. In an instant, all of his rage came flooding back. He stormed into the house and brutally attacked Badru once again. He didn't care about his wife, and he certainly didn't care about the unborn child she was carrying. Blinded by rage, he shoved Badru down the staircase. That single push didn't just destroy her, it took the life of their unborn baby. Badru was completely shattered. Lying in her hospital bed, she felt there was nothing left to live for. She walked to the window ready to end her life, but at the very last second, she changed her mind. Instead of choosing death, she chose to fight. She swore she would get justice, not only for herself, but for the child she had lost. Before leaving the hospital, she quietly took a box of sleeping pills with her, and that's where her revenge truly begins. One night, she drugged her husband, tied him up, and left him completely helpless. This brings us back to the opening scene of the movie. After forcing him to confess all of his abuse on camera, Badru and her mother sedated him once again. Then they dragged his unconscious body onto a railroad track. Their plan was simple. When the train hit him, everyone would believe it was nothing more than a tragic accident. But just as the speeding train came racing toward them, Badru froze. At that very moment, she realized something. If she took his life, how would she be any different from the monster he had become? With only seconds to spare, she and her mother pulled him off the tracks. She thought it was finally over. She thought she had broken the cycle, but she was wrong. Her husband still refused to let her go. He continued stalking her and making her life miserable. Then fate stepped in. One careless mistake, one wrong step, and within seconds, the speeding train struck him. The man who had spent years destroying other people's lives finally met the consequences of his own actions. Darlings isn't just another thriller. It's a powerful story about the countless women who suffer behind closed doors every single day. They're not superheroes. They're ordinary women, forced by extraordinary pain to find the courage to fight back.